Okay. Finally got everything set up here. All right. So, okay. So bunch of stuff to get through today. We're going to finish talking about culture briefly. Hopefully it won't take too long doing that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the exam and maybe do some review. And this table is stuck at the highest position. Okay, no worries. I got this. Okay. What is my favorite anime? I think my favorite anime of all time remains one that is called The Slayers. The 90s, and it's like a goofy dozen. Perfect. Okay. Is today's class on the midterm? Yes, indeed. Today's class is on the midterm. Because you have until next Tuesday, so you have lots of time. What lectures and chapters can you go? Okay, so what chapters? So everything, right? So everything from the beginning of the course, right? So the, sociology, what is sociology, concepts and theories, how sociologists do research, and culture, all on the first midterm. Okay, so all of that's there. Can you go back and forth on questions on the midterm on Canvas? Yes, I will. I won't put any restrictions. I might actually just get the whole load once, because that tends to work better than loading each question one at a time. So yes. Okay, some midterm review questions have stuff like. Wow. Okay. Okay, I will look at that. Here's the problem. I selected the exam or like the practice questions at times based on I don't necessarily like this question as much as the ones I'm putting on the exam. So I gave some of the less perfect questions. So I might have picked a couple that had some terms we didn't touch on in class. But yeah, definitely on the exam. If there's anything like that slips in, I'll correct it by giving multiple answers, right? When we kind of figure it out, we'll fix it. I'll be pretty careful about what I put on the exam, but if something slips in, don't worry. It's easy to fix, and that's the advantage of Canvas. If I slip in a bad question accidentally, it's easy to fix. Okay. Will not having the textbook affect your ability to do well in this exam? It should not. Midterm will only be on lecture material, correct. So my voice is cracking on the live stream a bit. Is that too high? Oh, hang on. I know what's happening. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That should be better. I'm a bad singer. Okay, so yes, I suppose I wouldn't, it might be a lot to go back and watch, 4 weeks worth of lectures, but, I don't know what you have going on this weekend, so, whatever. Okay, I think I answered, whoa. Okay, what I'm going to do, I want to get through the culture stuff first, and then I can answer some more exam questions. What kind of questions will be on the multiple choice? Error written. Oh, it's all multiple choice. Everything's multiple choice. It's all just 50 multiple choice questions.
There's no short answer, there's no writing, it's just multiple choice. Ooh, I'm sure. That sounds thrilling. Sometimes maybe I listen to myself to help fall asleep. Okay. I feel like I answered that already. Okay. 50 questions. Do you need your one card for the midterm? Okay, so I don't need you to bring your one cards, and I'll just answer this quickly. I do want to move into content because I do have a little bit to cover. What you do need to do though, and I will make sure that I put this up on a slide, before you leave, we need to verify that you've submitted the exam, right? So before you leave, you'll have to come down and either on your device show us that you submitted the exam, or we can check on, because I've got a master list through Canvas where I can see that you've submitted it, just so that we can make sure it's submitted. It is, okay, it's on Canvas, but if you want a paper copy, if you feel nervous about not having a paper copy or doing it online, email me and request a paper copy, please. Okay. Do I like trick questions? Or as long as we kind of know what we're doing, it should be fine. I don't do trick questions. The questions are not tricks, but they do have some nuance, especially the vignette style ones. So yes, the exam is in this class. Just come here. Don't go anywhere else. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Okay, these are questions from last time. Are the midterm questions the same level of difficulty? Most of them I took from the same question bank. I will use for most of the exam questions. So yes, they should be fundamentally very similar. Okay, we're down to our 2 questions that I didn't get a chance to answer last time. And I can answer more questions at the end once I get through the culture stuff. So I have just like 8 or so slides to go through. Would I agree that this postmodern society is leading to the reinvention of a pre-modern model of society? I don't know what that means. So no? I don't know. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Is postmodernism potentially dangerous? Could losing our sense of good and bad lead to society's downfall or the reintroduction of pre-modernism? That certainly has been the argument from people who oppose postmodernism. I guess we'll find out as we go forward. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So we ended off here, right? Or maybe not. Maybe we ended off here. We ended off here, right? Talking about some of the negatives of the postmodern condition. The fact that it makes it harder to have a kind of unified society. Because if we don't believe in kind of big overarching narratives, like religion, like nationalism, it gets harder to have agreement on all sorts of things, like what's good, what's in good taste, teach children and adolescents the difference between right and wrong, what is fun. By the way, I will just say this, the Citadel's Goblin Macbeth, which I went to last night with my 15-year-old, was excellent, and I think there's a few days left of it. So if you need a diversion and you want to support the arts, it was really, really funny. So, and really well done. So go to the Citadel, see Goblin Macbeth. Okay. The positives of postmodernism, or of the postmodern condition. So it frees people, right? Empowers ordinary people and makes them more responsible for their own fate, right? We're less reliant on these big narratives. You kind of make your own identities, make your own way through the world. You don't have to conform as much. And it has tended to lead people to be, since there isn't a conception of one culture, one way of being superior, it's tended to make people more tolerant of differences. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about culture as constraint. Those doors over there are really loud and I hate them a lot. I really hate having classes back to back. I feel like I'm always running and I'm a little discombobulated. All right, so rationalization, right? Or culture as constraint. One of the things from the sort of conflict theory view part of Max Weber, right? So this comes from conflict theory. In terms of culture potentially sort of constraining people, one of the things that Weber talks about as being really central to kind of modern culture is the idea that one of the core things is rationalization. So what does this mean, right? Basically, rationalization for Weber is a term that means that once we enter kind of modernity, one of the goals of society is to organize everything in society so that it is done in the most efficient way possible, right? So basically that, that your time, things like work, leisure, school are all done in the way that makes it the most efficient possible, right? So that it works the best in society. And one of the things that Max Weber says is that this makes modern cultures at times akin to an iron cage, right? And he's especially kind of contrasting, say, a pre-modern world where people would have had a lot more control over their time to the modern world. So I'll put it to you this way, right? Like back in the medieval era, maybe people were super poor, but broadly speaking, if you were a farmer on a medieval kind of feudal estate, you could choose in what order you did things, how long you worked in a day, as long as you accomplished the things you needed, right? There wasn't a lot of structure. But once you get into modernity, you get things like okay, think about it. If I'm sure you've all had jobs at this point, and you have to like clock in at your job at some point. If you show up late, right, you get in trouble. Your boss will be mad at you. If you leave early, your boss will be mad at you. And if you don't often do the kind of protocols that you're supposed to do, answer customer complaints a specific way, answer the phone in a particular manner, right, you will get in trouble. And so what Weber says is that modern society, in how much it tries to rationalize or kind of control and structure things in as efficient a way, turns society into kind of an iron cage, right, where you feel trapped. So okay, consider the way we measure and use time. I'll give you a kind of personal example, because a couple of years ago, it occurred to me that my teenage daughter is one of the best exemplars of this. So my teenage daughter, almost every day, has trouble getting out of bed. Like she has a really hard time. She wants to stay up late at night, but then getting up on time to get to school is really, really difficult. To the point where I've learned how to play the Celine Dion song, "My Heart Will Go On the recorder. And I'll just stand outside her room for like 10 minutes playing "My Heart Will Go On the recorder over and over again until she gets up and pulls the thing out of my hand. I have like 15 recorders in my house. You can buy them for like $1.50 at the dollar store. It's great. And it sounds terrible. Absolutely horrible. The recorder is a terrible instrument. But one of the things that sort of occurred to me is that this is, and she's like super conscious from about 11 o'clock till about 11 o'clock. So if school started at 11 o'clock, they were offended by my Celine Dion recorder playing. So if school started at 11 o'clock, she would be doing great, right? And teenagers tend to need a lot of sleep. They like to sleep in later in the day. If school started at 11 a.m., it would be great. But her school starts at 8:26, which, by the way, is an incredibly arbitrary time for anything to start. But no, literally, it starts at 8:26. Not 8:25, 8:26. How Weber would explain this is we've rationalized her going to school, right? Why is it at 8:26? Well, it's so I can get to work, right? So I can go off to work at my job, be there on time, and I know that my children are taken care of, from 8:26 to 3:21. Again, incredibly arbitrary times, so this is just how it works at her school. So this is a kind of iron cage, right? She would do better if she got to go to school from 11 to like 6. She would be great, right? This is her most awake time, but she's trapped in our rationalized iron cage of society. Okay. Another thing that, and this is particularly from a conflict theory perspective, that tends to constrain us in modern cultures is both the desire and the need to constantly consume products, right? Or consumerism. To the point where, increasingly, we define ourselves in large part by the goods that we purchase, right? Loud door. Hate you. But think about, I don't know if you remember, you're probably a little bit young to remember this, but in the kind of good old days of, when smartphones were still sort of a novelty or relatively new, huge communities grew up online, over the Android versus Apple people, with people on either side, viewing the other as somehow deficient, right? And, Apple itself has often played into this, right? With, relegating those of us who don't want to spend Apple kind of money on a phone to green bubbles, right? These sad green bubbles on the Apple phone. It sort of cultivated the idea that Apple is somehow superior and that people who own it, are in a different echelon, right? So they built kind of brand identities and convince people to consume. And this happens all the time, right? You wear specific things on your chest, right? You have specific brands that you adhere to or things that you want, signals that you send with your clothing because, basically our consumer culture has sort of made that one of the requirements, right? I made fun earlier in the course of people who walk around U of A campus wearing like an Oxford University shirt, or a Harvard. Harvard. You're not what you used to be. But why do people do that, right? It's to signal things. By purchasing things, you can signal things. Why do people buy an Audi, right? They're nice cars, but they're no more functional than a Ford or a GM car, or certainly no better than a Toyota in any way. Why do people buy them? To signal things, right? But this becomes a sort of constraint, and especially for Marxists, the creation of what they call false need, your belief that you need to buy things that you don't actually need is one of the constraints of modern culture, right? Through advertising, through, product placement, they convince you to buy stuff that you don't need so that you shop till you drop. You keep going back to work every single day, though your basic needs have long been met, to keep getting more stuff. Okay, so yes, we often tie our identities to particular purchases. I don't know if this makes sense. My mother-in-law, who's an interesting person, I will say little more about it than that. She has some very, very strong beliefs. And it might be the period that she grew up in, I don't know. But, for one of the things that she's very strong on is that she is a Chrysler person. And that, Ford is garbage. So my wife and I, a couple of years ago, we were looking for a new car and we bought a Ford Fusion because, it was relatively cheap. It fit our lifestyle really well. We really liked the way the car rides. And my mother-in-law was like, why in God's name did you buy a Ford? They're terrible. And then, it's like what everybody jokes about them, that Ford is found on road dead, or fix or repair daily. Actually had no trouble with it. It's a great car. But, she has tied her kind of identity to one particular automotive brand that she found relevant when she was a kid. And people do this all the time, right? Like, I only buy Ford F-150s because Ram trucks are garbage, right? Or whatever it happens to be. And we're encouraged to do this by our culture that wants us to, rather than thinking rationally about what the best purchase is or whether we actually need a thing, we're tied to a brand, so we feel like we have to obey that brand. Okay. I think I have 36 slides in this deck. I've lost my mouse. There it is. Just want to make sure I'm moving quickly enough through this. I'm doing great. Okay. So, subcultures. Subcultures are kind of an interesting aspect of consumer culture as well. And what subcultures are, and here I've got bronies, but you can think of a lot of other subcultures, right? Furries would be a subculture, if you know what that is. There's like the goth and emo subcultures. Hip hop kind of is a subculture in and of itself, right? There's all sorts of subcultures that you can talk about. But basically, what a subculture is, it's a group of people, they're adherents of a set of distinctive values, norms, and practices within the larger culture. And they can choose to buy items that help define them as members of a particular subculture, right? So generally subcultures, if you think of a subculture, one of the key features of a subculture is that they tend to have a particular style, right? So one of the classic examples of this is punk, right? So if you think of the punk subculture, right, one of the things that was true of punk was like ripped jeans, leather jackets, often with like studs in them, you know, colored hair or dyed hair, piercings, lots of piercings, all sorts of things like this, right? Punk had it was a subculture within the larger culture based largely on consumption, right? You bought things and you made them into aspects of, your subculture, and it had a particular visual style. These guys too, these are the bronies. If you don't know who they were, brony subculture has kind of died down, but in the 2010s, they were fans of the show, like adult male, predominantly male fans of the kid show My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Did my mic just die? No, it's good. The bronies have cut off my microphone, everyone. They were adult fans, and the reason I always think the bronies are really interesting, and you can find documentaries about them on YouTube, is that they adhered to a distinctive set of values, right? It was all about friendship, right? They were really focused on friendship because they listened to the ponies. Norms, right? How do you treat people with politeness, kindness, and all that stuff, and practices. And they had a very distinct kind of style, right? They would get cultural products and use them to kind of dress up as these characters from My Little Pony. And so they were always a really fascinating subculture. So subcultures generally are, again, a distinct culture within the larger culture. They're generally sort of not oppositional though, right? It's more like a live and let live kind of subculture, which contrasts to countercultures. So countercultures tend to be those that are subversive, right? And opposed to dominant values, seeking to replace them. And here, you can think of kind of early hip hop culture as probably, or the really disruptive elements of punk culture from, say, like Britain in the 1970s. Often what happens with a subculture is there's a rejection of kind of mainstream norms and a desire to break those norms down. So, with hip hop, it was a lot of like anti-bourgeois or anti-police, anti-kind of white discourses in kind of early hip hop culture. So, these cultures basically are like, hey, there's a problem with the dominant culture, and through our style, through our subculture, we oppose them and seek to kind of overturn them. Now, what tends to happen to countercultures is they get transformed into subcultures, right? So a lot of those subversive elements end up getting stripped out, and how shall we put this? They go mainstream, right? And here I'll give you an example, because I'm so very cool, right? So Snoop Dogg, right? This very famous rapper. Go back, if you can look at his discography, go back and listen to early Snoop Dogg's. It is extremely transgressive, right? A lot of anti-police discourse, a lot of discourse. I mean, I think he still has a lot of discourse about doing drugs, though he has toned it down considerably, right? But a lot of like anti-establishment kind of discourses. If you listen to kind of more contemporary Snoop Dogg, okay, I'll put it this way. How much Snoop Dogg has sold out. It is hard to quantify, but I'll quantify it like this. You can buy Snoop Dogg as a skin in Fortnite. That's how much of a sellout he is, right? And this is a very normal process, right? So the popular culture basically has stripped out all of the subversive elements of Snoop Dogg and essentially made him acceptable to 9 to 15-year-old boys on Fortnite, right? So now it's no longer subversive because it has to be acceptable because some parent has to pay with their credit card for that Snoop Dogg skin. So Snoop Dogg has been kind of stripped of all of those things. Hip hop still exists, but through consumerism, it's been turned into just another product, right? And so consumerism in a lot of ways acts as a sort of social control mechanism that takes things like countercultures, right, tames them, turns them into products and sells them. And so what you get is a sort of dilution, right? Eventually, those really subversive subcultures, okay, it's like initially hip hop culture was aimed at a very kind of, particular socioeconomic and racial class, right? Typically kind of lower socioeconomic class African Americans. But as it got popular, right, it started to be more targeted towards a broad audience. White people started, consuming hip hop. And now it's very non-subversive, right? The most subversive things about it are that people talk really fast and are very materialistic. But a lot of those anti-police discourses and anti-establishment discourses have sort of been scrubbed out of mainstream hip hop. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, the mechanism of this is consumerism, right? Turn it into a product. Products need big markets. And how do you corrupt, someone like Snoop Dogg and turn him mainstream? Well, you throw big piles of cash at him, right? Enough money will make almost anybody turn mainstream. Okay, 6 more slides. And how am I doing for time? It's 1 o'clock. I got 50 minutes. 10 minutes per slide. No, I'm not going to do that. We have a little bit of review to do as well and some questions. Okay. So, cultural capital. So this is a term that comes from Pierre Bourdieu. You don't need to know his name, but I'll write it anyway. And basically, cultural capital is another way that we sort of control things that culture controls certain things. So what is cultural capital? Okay, it's the beliefs and tastes and norms and values that people draw upon in everyday life. And what do they draw upon it for? To relate to other people. So cultural capital would include things like manners, etiquette, language, what's appropriate language. So you kind of have hopefully an instinctive sense of, if you want to come and talk to me, how you're going to talk to me. You're probably not going to come up and after lecture and start like swearing and throwing F-bombs. You're going to come up and you're going to speak, probably in very polite terms, assuming that I deserve some kind of respect. Why? Well, this is cultural capital, right? So you know that if you want to get something from me, you need to approach me in a certain way. And okay, I'm going to tell you this because it's kind of funny and I always find it a little bit strange and annoying. I get a lot of requests from students for letters of recommendation. Now that's not the annoying part, that's totally normal and I totally get it because you want to get into master's programs and other programs, right? And I think this is ChatGPT's influence. In the last couple of years, the first chunk of every single email I get about this is some like flattery complimenting, like them complimenting me or flattering me. They're like, I have taken 4 of your courses and I've found the content to be transformative. It's changed my worldview in ways that I scarcely know how to articulate. And I'm always like, okay, I mean, I'm great and all, but that seems a little excessive. But this is kind of cultural capital, right? It's like, okay, I want this person to like me and to be willing to write me a letter of recommendation. So I have to know how to talk to them, right? Because culturally, we have certain, ways that we're expected to talk to people we're asking things of, right? If you want a raise from your boss, you have to approach them a certain way. If you want to get promoted, right, you have to relate to your superiors in particular ways, right? Maybe you start subtly dropping to your golf-loving boss how much you love golf and how good you are at it. You better actually be good at it, though. Right? All of these kinds of things are cultural capital. they're ways of moving through life to get what you want. Now, different socializations, different social classes have different kinds of social capital, right? I know this because, having worked as an undergrad in construction, one of my observations is that working class people didn't give a shit about the stuff I cared about. They were far less, worried about talking in particularly polite ways, especially amongst each other. It was a very different kind of way of being. And if you wanted, something from people who were in the trades, the approach was quite different, right? It wasn't there wasn't a lot of flattery. It was much more direct. And it was, if you wanted them to help you with something, a completely different way of being because they have a different kind of social capital. So social capital is class-bound, it's place and time-bound, and it's about how you approach people, right? Talking about Shakespeare with a bunch of working class guys is going to get you about 8 inches, but talking about football and hockey, way better, right? This is why I continue to follow hockey. My dad is very working class, and honestly, if I didn't know something about the Montreal Canadiens, I would have nothing to talk about with him half the time, right? That's his kind of cultural capital. So that's what cultural capital is. Okay, so it's symbolic rather than material, right? It's about how you present yourself and then how people react to you. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And it plays an important role in shaping your fate in society. If you don't know how to talk to people, if you don't know how to relate to people through cultural capital, you're going to find it hard to move through life, right? One of the arguments Bourdieu makes when he talks about cultural capital is this is one of the reasons that working class kids tend to have more trouble in school because they have a set of cultural capital learned from their families, and then they go into school and their teachers, who are overwhelmingly middle and upper class, have a different set of cultural capital, and that can clash at times. Okay. I am not a brony. Okay, so the only reason I ever learned about My Little Pony is because at the time I had a 5-year-old girl. She's 15 now. And she loved My Little Pony. And to be fair, My Little Pony was one of the only kids shows I could watch that didn't make me want to gouge my eyes out with a spoon. That includes Bluey. I hate Bluey. I know it's supposed to be wholesome, but I find it mind-numbingly dull. I also have a 5-year-old now, so I just can't take Bluey. I understand why it's charming, I just hate it. What would be my favorite pony? I was always partial to Rainbow Dash. I don't know why. Rainbow Dash is a badass. Are fandoms different from subcultures? Fandoms are very much a subculture. Okay, I will say I went down a rabbit hole on bronies at one point because I was teaching a class on pop culture, and bronies were an interesting subculture that we went through. So anyway, bronies which still exist from the original fandom are mostly furries now. Okay, enough said about this. Ugh. New ones are mostly grown-up former girls watching Friendship is Magic back in 2010s. Okay, thoughts on Snoop Park being in Trailer Park Boys? I have none. Rainbow Dash is awful. You're awful. What would you rather? Rarity? She's a narcissist. Come on, guys. I watched a lot of My Little Pony as a kid, or when my daughter was a kid. I was a lot of My Little Pony. Am I good at golf? What's my handicap? My handicap is I hate golf. I go with my friend because he really likes it, and he's like, he consistently golfs like 5 under par, and I'm like, 20 over par. I just don't care. Can I tell you something stupid and random? I worked at a rental car company when I got out of university. And to this day, the set of golf clubs that I own is a set of golf clubs that I found in the back of a rental car that no one ever claimed. So, there you go. Miss Rachel. I have not watched any Miss Rachel, so I don't know. What's the difference between cultural capital and just cultural economic identity? Cultural capital will be linked to class, right? Socioeconomic class. But there will be people within this kind of socioeconomic class that have more or less ability to navigate culturally, right? So some people will have more of it, right? Smooth talking people, right? Those you would say have a lot of, shall we say, riz. Oh God, I freaking hate Gen Z slang. Those are the people with more cultural capital. Okay, back. A couple slides. Okay, I wrote on that one. All right, culture jamming. Okay, culture jamming, this is something that happens a lot online. Another aspect of trying to free ourselves from the constraints of consumerism. And usually what culture jamming is this kind of form of resistance against mainstream consumer culture by kind of making fun of it, right? By making fun of pop culture or aspects of culture in major ways, often in an attempt to try and show what is really at the core of, say, a brand, right? So I always like this one, right? Someone taking, the Apple logo and, appearance costs, right? And it costs what, about $1,700 per phone, or $6 coffee, right? Overpriced coffee. McDonald's, because you only have $4. Man, I wish you could get anything at McDonald's anymore for $4. This is clearly old. This is absolutely true, but this should also be Lego now. We throw in extra parts just to mess with you, right? They're kind of lovingly making fun of popular culture in ways to kind of show what's at the core of, say, a brand, right? This is what's called culture jamming, right? So, there was, when Disney bought Star Wars, I remember a few years ago, people started depicting Mickey Mouse as Darth Vader, and then putting Mickey Mouse ears on the Death Star from Star Wars, with the idea, right, that Disney equals the Empire. Not anymore, though. Disney's doing bad. But this was the idea, right? By depicting Mickey Mouse as Darth Vader and the Death Star having mouse ears, this was a way of signaling that Disney had become sort of culturally hegemonic in the way that the Empire from Star Wars was. So I hope that makes sense. I think hey, I love Lego, but every time I do a set with one of my kids, there are extra parts in the box, and it's enough to drive you slightly crazy, because then you're like, oh God, what did I miss? Yes, that's a good definition. I like your definition of cultural capital. I'm going to leave it there. Okay, so virtual culture. Very quickly, virtual culture. What's interesting about virtual culture? So virtual culture, obviously emerges kind of with the internet. And it's really changed up a lot of things in how people relate, right? So there's benefits and concerns. Let's go to hang on. I'll get back to your questions in a sec. So what's good about virtual culture, right? Limitless access to information. You have a supercomputer in your pocket or in your hand right now that basically allows you to access every piece of information or make ChatGPT do it for you. This one's always interesting. Space to play with identity, exploring different identities through avatars. This is one of my favorites because I had a good friend, I think she's at York now, really smart kind of gaming scholar of online video games. And one of the things that she looked at early in her career was how people play with identity in games like, in this case, it was World of Warcraft, because it was a while ago. And she wrote what I think is the paper with my favorite title ever. It was Big-Breasted Night Elves and the Men Who Love to Be Them. All about how men would play as female avatars and what that meant, why men were playing in these particular avatars. It's a really, really interesting paper. Kelly Bergstrom's her name, right? A lot of space to play with identity online. And it opens all these cultural playgrounds where you can do different things. Okay, the bad, increasing kind of distraction. I'm just gonna, hang on, I'll put that in a color you can actually see. Yellow. Distraction. You can't see that either, oh well. Inattention and increasing mental health concerns with young people. Mental health, and you can come take my sociology of youth class. We talk about that. This has become hang on, what am I doing? Back. This has become a really interesting kind of debate in the last few years. So kind of led by Jean Twenge, who in 2017 wrote a book called iGen, but also by Jonathan Haidt, who wrote a book called The Anxious Generation last year. It's a really interesting book. You should all read it. And one of the things they've suggested is, particularly, because Gen Z has transitioned so much of their lives from in-person to online, right? They spend less time doing all of these things, volunteering, working, doing homework, playing sports, attending religious services, being part of political parties, clubs, just about anything you can imagine that required in-person interaction, Gen Z does less of. They're physically safer, have more leisure time, but since 2012, we've seen the rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm skyrocket amongst Gen Z. And why is 2012 important? Well, that's the year that 50% of Americans had an iPhone, 75% of teenagers had a smartphone, and 94% of emerging adults, so people 19 to 29, had a smartphone. So that happens in about 2012, and since then, the trajectory of mental illness amongst Gen Z and younger millennials has just been like straight up. Did not mean to do that with a highlighter. I meant to do that with a pen in red. Okay. So, I made a mark on my screen and everything. Okay. I think this is my last slide, and then we'll talk exam again. So, Sherry Turkle, she's a human computer interaction scholar at MIT, has suggested 3 important things that kids learn from virtual culture. You will always be heard, right? Your voice matters. You can direct your attention wherever you want. Never have to be bored, and this is a problem. Jonathan Haidt just wrote a piece in the New York Post about this. This morning, actually, it came out this morning. Boredom is kind of the spur of creativity, and what we're seeing in young people is less and less kind of markers of creativity. They're never distracted, they never get to get bored, so they never get to be creative. I'm sorry to tell you. Okay, so, and that you never have to be alone, right? You can always connect with someone online, and increasingly, hey, what is, one of those things, and this is really freaking scary, by the way, because this is coming really fast. There's been an absolute ginormous boom in AI girlfriends and AI girlfriend apps, right? People not talking to people anymore, but talking to this kind of digital version of perfection that will tell you whatever you want to hear based on these large language models, that will just feed you stuff, for the low price of a subscription fee. You can subscribe to your AI girlfriend who will always make you happy. Okay, hang on, I thought someone was clapping. That would have been weird. I'm just gonna go back to the Q&A, and I'll see if you have any questions, and then we can, if you want, do a little bit of a practice. I have a Kahoot. We can do some practice questions in class. Oop, my window resized. Okay. Okay. Hang on. When I exit out of things, everything breaks, so. Yep. Yeah. Okay, there we go. The things I do for all the people who don't bother to come. Okay. So, what's the academic paper that talks about men playing as big honka ladies in videos? It's called Big-Breasted Night Elves and the Men Who Love to Play as Them. Kelly Bergstrom is the name of the person who wrote it. She's a friend. Your lack of belief is noted. Or let's put it in cultural terms. I find your lack of faith disturbing. There you go. Like 5 people got that reference. If we memorize everything from the slides to prepare for the midterm, is that good enough to get a 90? Sure, I think, probably. I don't know. This is hard because some of the questions are you have to be able to reason your way to it. So I think just memorizing things, you probably want to understand the concepts. But yeah, I think I mean, if you memorize everything, you should do fine. Okay, little ones are meant for if you lose them. If there's big ones, then you built it wrong. Trust you're a Lego expert. Okay, fair enough. Please review determining causes, sequences, and non-spuriousness. Oh, yeah, so I can do that really quickly, right? If we're talking about, this is in the research section, right? If we're talking about determining like whether there's cause and effect, right, in a relationship between variables, so sequencing, basically whatever your independent variable is, your presumed cause in the cause and effect relationship, it has to be introduced before the change in your dependent variable, right? So, you know, if you're talking about an experiment and it's like, I want to see the effect of caffeine intake on people's memorization skills, right? And their memory skills start to improve before you give them caffeine, it's out of sequence. Uh-oh. I lost my question. Hang on. Oh, there it is. For non-spuriousness, this is where you want to determine whether there is another variable that might be affecting your dependent variable, right? So the example, I think I gave it in this class. I can't remember anymore. I teach many classes. You know, it was the ice cream and murders example, right? Is there a correlation between increased ice cream sales and murders? Because when ice cream sales start to go up, murders start to go up too. No, there's a spurious or, you know, other variable that's affecting both. In this case, heat, right? It gets hotter outside. People buy more ice cream, and they also are outside more, so they get into more fights and more murders happen, just as a kind of norm. Okay. What? No, I don't know what that is. Nothing. Yeah. I get the bluey's cute. I just don't like it. Just give us an overview of what to study to actually pass and do good. Like what you think we should do. Honestly, I always have problems with this question because it's different for everybody, right? Like what do you actually need to do? I would say review slides and notes, try the practice quizzes and see how you do. Know the concepts, right? Really know the key concepts really, really well. So my ADHD is clearly kicking in because of these questions. But yeah, honestly, it really depends on the person, but if you know the material, you will do fine, honestly. I can't guarantee a 90, but you will do well. I think, you know, everything is fair game that's on the slides. Okay. Cultural yes, I said that, but I was going to leave it up because I like that definition. You talk to your AI, Snapchat AI. That's disturbing, but not surprising. I'm going to go with yes, but from a sociological perspective, I cannot confirm. Okay. Could we say that another downside is overload of information, anything and everything all the time contributes to anxiety? I think that's fair. I don't have it on there, but I think that's fair. Do you need to know what people are associated with the theory? So I'm going to say I try not to put in like, you know, who said this? You know, was it Karl Marx, Emile Durkheim? I try not to put in those kinds of questions because I don't love them. So I'm more like, you know, Freya would like to seize the means of production from her bourgeois masters. You know, what kind of sociological theory would Freya, you know, tend to choose? You know, and the answer there would be conflict theory. That's more the style I prefer, rather than like, who said, you know, religion is the opium of the masses? Was it Karl Marx, Emile Durkheim, Max Weber? You know, I don't like that style of question. Occasionally one slips in because I try to create a large test bank. But generally speaking, I'm not going to ask you, especially for the like more marginal figures, like Merton. I'll often give you the person's name in the question. It's like, you know, Merton's strain theories later in the course. That's when we get to crime. But Merton's theory of, you know, manifest and latent function, some kind of question about that. Okay. Are the questions going to be difficult? I mean, I lost my questions. I mean, I think SOC 100 has a reputation of not being that difficult. In general, the questions are not that hard. I don't find them hard, but I teach this subject. So, you know, take that for what it will. I mean, it depends. It generally depends. I don't think they're hard questions, though. And there's no, there's basically no all of the above, none of the above. It's really straightforward. And the practice questions are quite representative of it. Okay, click. Can you please do an interpretive dance to pass the midterm? Okay, but my subjective judgment of interpretive dance is very harsh. So it better be really good. There have to be costumes, fireworks. I need some lighting direction going on. I'm really a fan of live music, so no interpretive dance. Okay. What are the main theories again? Lol, I definitely pay attention, trust me. Okay, your big theories: conflict theory, Marx; structural functionalism, Durkheim; symbolic interactionism, Weber; feminism. I don't have I don't have a specific thinker for feminism. And then we talked about some marginal ones like postmodernism with Foucault, and I think we mentioned queer theory, but I don't have a thinker associated with that. So that just all right. Now we're in silly season. So all right. What are the main theories? Okay, I think I've answered it. Any more questions? You can always email me. I'll do my best over the weekend to ignore my children and answer only your emails. Very, can I level with you? Failing in this class itself would require some effort. Honestly, you can do bad, but outright failure, I think, requires a degree of commitment that it doesn't sound like you have. So I'm going to go with that. It's possible, but not easy. Yes, it's all on that link. Like, go to that link. It's a playlist on YouTube. It's a playlist on YouTube, right? All of the lectures for this course are there. Okay. You don't have to subscribe. I also don't get any ad revenue, just so you know. I'm not monetized, and I think it's dumb, but the video or the video platform that the university offers is so horrifically terrible that I just can't bring myself to use it over YouTube. Okay, we got like 20 minutes. Let's do a quick Kahoot, shall we? You can leave if you like, but these are kind of practice questions. So it'll give you a sense, and I will explain them as we go, so that'll be fun. Okay. Classic mode. Go big. Nope, that's not working. Sorry, people at home. You can't apparently watch the Kahoot. There we go. Oh, I wish, man. All right, I'm going to leave this for 2 more seconds, and I'm going to start it. All right, What are rationalization and consumerism examples of? Are they culture as privilege, culture as constraint, culture as freedom, or culture as lifestyle? This should be really easy. We just talked about this like 5 minutes ago. Right, this is culture as constraint, right? Rationalization makes my daughter go to school when she doesn't want to go to school, and consumerism makes you buy brands you don't want and gets rid of or turns Snoop Dogg into a sellout. Paige, you're in the lead. When people artificially pose for a photograph, what type of bias is occurring? Is it, this is from the social research, reactivity, sensitivity, attached observation, or detached observation? Right, so this is reactivity, right? People react to your presence as a researcher. When you are trying to take a picture of your friends and they give you bunny ears or something, right? They're reacting to the photograph. It's reactivity. And it's the same thing that happens if people know they're being experimented on. Okay. I love the randomness of the points in this game. Why is culture important? Culture can detract from human experience. It can supplement human experience, create shared norms and values, or culture is impossible without human experience. Okay, that one's easy, right? Gives us shared norms and values. Super easy. Some of these are based on questions from the test. I just had to shorten them because Kahoot has a very strict character limit. All right, punks in the 1970s are an example of, is it a cultural capital, culture jamming, a subculture, or a counterculture? So they start out as very, very kind of anti-authority. Right, so they are a counterculture at first, and then it gets corrupted and turned into a subculture later. All right. A cat. Kate and a cat. I like it. Okay. Which of the following leads to statistically significant results? Is it sophisticated statistics, experimental methods, a representative sample, or an outsider's viewpoint? Okay, right, this is the representative sample. You need a big enough sample of people to get enough that it matches kind of your population. All right. What do we call the relationship between two variables that is accidental? Is it a dependent relationship, a connected relationship, a spurious relationship, or an independent relationship? All right, you rock that one, right? This is our spurious relationship. Something else is affecting the relationship between your dependent and independent variables. All right. Which revolution put forward the idea that humans can intervene and shape society? Is this democratic, industrial, scientific, or sociological? Right, so this is the democratic revolution. This one, a little bit dicier, but right, the world isn't set up by God. People can reshape society and people should have the power to do so. That's from really early in the course. All right, which principle of research ethics makes debriefing research participants mandatory? Is it authenticity, anonymity, confidentiality, or voluntary participation? Ooh, this was a little tricky. Okay, this one, again, a little bit dicier. Authenticity, you can't lie to your participants, and if you do, you have to tell them what the lie was. Okay. Which term refers to knowledge based on customary assumptions that may or may not be accurate? Is it scientific thinking, grounded thinking, groundless thinking, or unscientific thinking? 10 forms of this. You went through them in painful detail. Okay, right, these are unscientific thinking, right? There were 10 forms of unscientific thinking, which you should probably know what each of them is. All right. People are abandoning ship. Indigenous resistance to colonialism is an example of what? Is it rationalization, postmodernism, the erosion of authority, or a rights revolution? Right, so this is very good, right? A rights revolution, marginalized group reclaiming their identities as part of the mainstream and often increasing pride. Okay. What does a quantitative research project begin with, or process begin with? Do you select a method, a theoretical idea, a case study, or collecting data? So quantitative is about putting things into numbers. Use a deductive approach. What do you start with? Okay, again, this one again is a little more split. Quantitative, you start with a theory and then you collect your data. It goes theory to data. Qualitative, you go data to theory, right? And what's called grounded theory. Okay. The idea that people use clothing to express their identities is consistent with which theory? Lots of questions like this could happen. Symbolic interactionist, functionalist, conflict theory, or feminist. So who says this? This was part of our, the fashion cycle questions. Okay, yes, you got it. This is our symbolic interactionist. Good job. Okay. What does the operationalization process do? Does it translate variables into hypotheses? Does it turn concepts into variables? Patterns into hypotheses? Or patterns into propositions? Okay, very good. Majority there. Yeah, so basically operationalization, you're taking an idea or a concept and turning it into something you can measure into a variable. Okay. We're virtually there. If one variable changes systematically as the other changes, the variables are said to be, are they dependent, spurious, identical, or related? All right, they are related. The dependent variable is the one that changes, but the variables are related. Okay. Saying that the Edmonton Oilers cannot win on Tuesdays is an example of what type of thinking? This, by the way, you will definitely get questions like this on the exam. Is this a generalization, an overgeneralization, an exception to the rule, or illogical reasoning? Okay, right, this is seeing a pattern where no pattern truly exists, right? Maybe you've seen, the Oilers struggle on Tuesdays, but it's not the fact that it's a Tuesday that makes them struggle, it is something else. All right, what kind of link exists between storks and babies in Scandinavia? So storks show up and then babies show up. Is it a controlled association, a causal relationship, a spurious association, or a time-ordered relationship? Okay, very good, right? This is spurious, right? Despite the iconography, storks are not related to babies in any way, except their own. All right, what kind of research is Statistics Canada's national census? Is it survey research, a field study, ethnographic research, or experimental research? So they send out a list of questions and everyone in the country is supposed to answer them. Very nice. Yes, this is survey research. Okay. Obviously. Folkways can be described as, is it right versus wrong, right versus rude, right versus illegal, or right versus forbidden? Very good, right. Folkways are right versus rude. It's an informal punishment and all that jazz. Okay. Which of the following terms refers to ideas about good, bad, and right and wrong? Are these theories, scientific reasoning, values, or norms? Okay, right, these are values. Okay, that one's pretty easy. Oh, norms are like the rules, right? So what's good and bad is kind of like, that's the value. The actual rules that govern it, those are the norms. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Forward I go. All right. The following image is an example of which of the following? Is it virtual culture, consumerism, a counterculture, or culture jamming? Squeaky shoes. All right, right, this is culture jamming. Right, they're kind of lovingly making fun of these brands to show what their true meaning is. Okay. Which theory studies macro structures, shared values, and focuses on social equilibrium? Is it symbolic interactionalism, functionalism, feminism, or conflict theory? Okay, so here, what's really key to this one, right? Anytime you see kind of homeostasis, social equilibrium, right, function, dysfunction, this kind of language of like keeping society balanced, you're in the realm of functionalism, right? Because that's the whole goal of functionalism, to help, to kind of analyze where social institutions are either in function or dysfunction. The following term refers to the capacity to create complex social life by establishing norms. Distribution, abstraction, cooperation, or production. All right, that is cooperation, right? So create complex social life by establishing norms that everybody gets a similar set of rules, and it allows us to all work together. That is what is meant here. Okay. Which of the following refers to social relations that are stable and patterned? Is it social solidarity, social forces, sociological maps, or social structures? Very nice. Very good. That one's, you did well. You did great. Social solidarity is more like those shared norms and values that allow communities to kind of feel connected to each other. That's a Durkheim term. Right, think of the suicide stuff from the beginning of the course for social solidarity. All right, which theorist is most responsible for the development of conflict theory? I will 100% not ask this question on the exam, but it's a pretty easy one. Is it Charles Darwin, Herbert Spencer, Emil Durkheim, or Karl Marx? I think literally every time I talk about this theory, I use his name or a derivation thereof. Right, this is Karl Marx, right? Conflict theory is Marx. If I'd had Weber on there, you could have put Weber. There's a reason I don't have Weber on there because it would be confusing, right? Conflict theory is Marx. The conflict between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and then all the ways that kind of oppressor-oppressed structure gets carried out to other forms of conflict theory. 2 more questions. A sign that you're dealing with a taboo is... It causes revulsion. It can only be done in public. It is considered rude, or it can only be done in private. I have twitchy eye. Yes, it causes revulsion, right? Like the idea of making out with your sibling. It's gross. Not because your sibling is necessarily gross, because your culture has told you it's gross. All right, last question. What is the main advantage of an insider's viewpoint for acquiring knowledge of an organization? Is it extensive detail of the group's activity, a global perspective, whatever that means, a critical attitude, or conformity to organizational rules? Okay, right. So it's, you know what, from an insider's perspective, you know the details of how organizations are run. That's what it does. All right, let's see who won. Not that there are prizes, but Mel in second place. And Maddie. Wow, all the M's. Everyone with M's in their name was a winner. Good job. I'll try to bring prizes for the next one. I just forgot today. All right. Hello. Oh, I'm going to turn off my microphone.
This is the question from the practice group.
Yes, yes.
So I'm confused why this one is not part of the culture.
Do you know what shorthand is?
Yeah, like
Yeah, so like
I create
your own kind of.
yeah.
So like, you know, people will create a shorthand, so instead of writing full words, they write like a shortened version.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that so a shorthand is composed of symbols, and it's not part of culture, right?
Yeah.
So because it's just you creating it for yourself, so it's not widely shared by other people,
so
right?
Culture must be the wide shared.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Hello.
You said you were a sociologist on religion that specializes in Catholicism.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're probably the perfect person to ask this. Are you aware, obviously, about how fast Mormonism is growing?
Sure. Yeah. It's one of the fastest growing religions, probably the first religion to go from like a new religious movement to a world religion in the last 100 years.
Yeah. Do you think the fact that they essentially reinvented the whole good works aspect of faith and good works in a Protestant perspective might have had any part in that, other than obviously the whole wanting to make million babies type thing?
So I would say what probably has led to the growth of Mormonism more than anything else is that it generates a lot of social benefits for the people who adhere to it, right? They're relatively tight-knit communities. They produce a lot of economic and social benefits for the people who take part in them, right? And so they've managed to convince a lot of people to convert based on that, right? Like it requires a lot of commitment, but you get a lot out of it as well.
I heard though that what's more important to their growth though is the fact that they just produce million babies, like the Muslims or
right.
in Ireland.
I would tend to view that as kind of a secondary aspect, right? Is why do the people stay, right? Why do they listen? Why are they so tuned in to the particular teachings of that religion? It's more the intensity of the religion and all of the social benefits that it then produces, right? Like really tight knit communities
Yeah.
that all share values and can sort of reinforce those values. And having lots of babies is sort of part of the Mormon religious
Well, it's
identity, right?
literally theologically built in.
Well, exactly,
Versus
right?
Catholicism, which is just don't allow it to be sinful.
I mean, it's pretty built into Catholicism as well, right? Like the prescription of be fruitful and multiply is sort of a basic kind of. I mean, that's the reason for the prescriptions against contraception.
Right.
What I think for Catholicism and why it's breaking down a little bit more compared to Mormonism is it's much more dispersed. There's less kind of tangible kind of benefit that you get from being a Catholic, right? And there's a lot less social reinforcement. The Catholics don't tend to keep an eye on each other the way Mormons do, right?
Does it maybe have something to do with the age of it, though?
Oh, certainly. As things get more established and bigger, it gets harder and harder to maintain